Hey everyone, this is Sarah from 10 Minute Creative, and today I'm really psyched to share with you how to paint a Milky Way. And this has been a skill that I have been having so much fun with. I have been on a kick of painting a bunch of these with a variety of foregrounds, like trees, which is what I'm going to show you. I've painted mountains in front. I've actually used that masking fluid to mask out mountains and then do some line drawings of mountains in front. You can do all sorts of things with this Milky Way painting. And I will confess it did take me more than 10 minutes. So enjoy. So to get started in painting the Milky Way, the first thing to do is just wet your paper. And this is called the wet on wet technique with watercolor. So you just lay down a nice thick layer of water. Well, I shouldn't say thick, but just a nice layer of water on your paper. And that way when you start putting down pigment, it's going to spread and you're not going to get any hard lines. When I was opening up my paint, I accidentally got dried paint on the paper. I was able to just sort of smear it around, wipe up the dried particles, and keep going. So that's what the start of my painting looked like. The beauty of this painting is that it's really flexible. You can put all sorts of colors in. You can have streaks, and it's really not a big deal. So you can see I'm just laying down a layer of indigo paint. You can use any blue that you want, or a Payne's gray, anything like that. And then as I go, my paper stays nice and wet, and I'm going to start adding darker color around the edges and even just throughout the top 2/3 or top half of my painting. Once I've got that, this is where I start making the Milky Way. And what I do is I need clean water, and you can see I'm just dropping down just little drops of clean water. And what that does is it pushes the ink to the side, and you get that beautiful streak of stars that you see in the Milky Way. So I just do this over time, just keep dipping my brush in clean water and parting the paint. And you can make any design that you want. This isn't the final version of the Milky Way, but this is the start to getting the white of the paper. So you can see I'm just pushing the paint around with all this clean water, getting a design that I want and that I'm happy with, and then I will move on to the next step. Once I'm happy with the outline of that Milky Way, I'm going to just start dropping in more dark paint around that outline. And you can see I've got some brush streaks down low. The other thing that I'm doing throughout this process is just trying to keep my paper wet. So I dip it in a little bit of color and water and just do nice long brush strokes to keep it wet. But I'm just dabbing dark color around the edge of the Milky Way, and sometimes near the top of the page, and then I'll get my brush wet and just smear those little blotches out so they look more normal and more natural from the night sky. Once I'm happy with how that Milky Way looks, I might go back with just more water and clean some more stripes out. But once I'm happy with that, I grab white paint, and what I have is gouache, which is a water-based paint. It's just a little less translucent than watercolor. And on that wet paper along the Milky Way, I just start dabbing in spots of white where I want that Milky Way to be more vibrant. And this isn't my final product, obviously. What I'm going to do once I've got the drops where I want them is dip my paintbrush into water and again just start smearing that, just working the edges of all that white paint and on the border of the white and dark, and just getting out, making it just look a little bit more natural. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to take my time and go through the painting with that. And your brush, if when you're working in that dark color, starts to get dirty. So I just keep using clean water and smoothing out those paint drops until I'm happy with how that looks. And from here, what I'm going to do is grab a little bit more white paint, and while that dark night sky is still wet, I'm going to put in a couple bigger stars if I feel like it. And again, the reason we want it to be wet is you're going to get these fuzzy lines. And then I'm going to add a few stars. And what I do with adding stars is I've got a relatively liquidy paint on that brush, and then I'm going to just tap my brush and you can see it just splatters. And the trick with that is not having too much water on your brush. If you get too much water, you end up with really big blobs. So start with thicker paint. If it doesn't scatter, add a little bit of water and work your way into that thick or into the thin paint versus starting with really thin paints. And then once it dries, this is a picture of it dried, I grab more white paint and really splatter a bunch more stars. And I focus having a bunch of stars near the Milky Way and then a few stars out on the edges. And from there you can leave it, or you can paint silhouettes, and you can paint a silhouette of a mountain. In my case, I chose to paint some silhouettes of trees at the bottom. It gives it a pretty cool night scene look. I just draw the trunk of the tree first, and then I just go back and forth drawing in branches. And this doesn't have to be perfect. Keep in mind that trees in nature are imperfect, and so you can draw some with crooked branches, places where branches don't obviously come off on the trunk at the same point. Have some fun with this, and I just draw a variety of trees, different heights, different widths, all throughout this bottom of the painting. And you can either put trees all the way across the bottom, or you can see here I did it in 3 clumps. I just liked the way that that looked. But just have some fun with this, and you end up with a really cool night sky with the trees at the bottom of it.